Yeah, so welcome to the Growing Media Trial Station. We're going to quickly run through what we're going to be doing today. So we've got the current raw materials that Stephen will be presenting, and then we're going to look at the Fibagro range, our new products, and then we're going to get a chance to look around at the trials that are all behind you, and at the end just going to give you some tips about getting the best out of peat-free growing media. Really the journey to sustainable growing media, some of you will be more than familiar with this, but we didn't start using peat really until the 1930s. We grew things without peat before, so I'm sure we will be fine growing things without peat in the future. But it was not until the 1970s that we started using 100% peat mixes. And you know, some of this journey that we've been on currently, you know, in the 1990s, the government actually started restricting some of the planning for harvesting of peat. And actually in 1999, DEFRA set some very ambitious targets that clearly we didn't quite get there either. And then in 2024, we had another expected target of being peat-free in retail growing media. And again, we didn't get there either. So as the picture suggests, we've been kicking this can down the road for a long time now.
So what I thought we'd do is we would go back to basics and look at what a grow media is providing. It is to anchor plants, to provide adequate air spaces for root respiration. It needs to hold sufficient available water, sufficient available nutrition. It needs to be free from plant pathogens, weeds and pests, and be safe to be handled by workers on the nursery and the end consumer. What we currently do here at ICL with our Leamington Advance Sustain range is we can blend our range of current Fibagro wood fibres with pine bark and coir. And we can do that with a range of standard products and custom products with our technologies that we can incorporate. So that includes Osmocoats, our trace elements, Micromax, H2 Grow, and either a slow release or controlled release N fertiliser. And we can do that to create a total growing solution for your nursery. So I thought we'd dive down into the raw materials that we're going to touch on today with some current kind of concerns and characteristics of them. So pine bark we'll start with, which we'll focus on the 0 to 8 grade of pine bark, because that's the one that's primarily used in peat-free growing. This season in particular, we've had a very wet spring, as we all know, but that has actually affected the quality and availability of this grade of pine bark. For horticulture, you need a very specific and high quality grade of it. So actually some mixes this year we have had to swap out the pine bark for other raw materials, and it has been a bit of a challenge with the availability of other raw materials at the time. But with the new range of Fibagro wood fibres that we've got on show today, hopefully this will be something that we can help with the transition in the future. So just a little bit more on bark. It's got a low water holding capacity, higher air-filled porosity. It's lower in buffering capacity, and it's the one raw material, as it's an aged product rather than a manufactured product, that it draws down the most nitrogen when used in grow media mixes. So here's just a snapshot of some of the bark that we use. So we look at things like the pH, the NPK, and the kind of overall conductivity. And we check these when these raw materials come to us and before they go out to the end user. So coir, as we're all aware, it's a byproduct of the coconut industry. The main thing that people look at with coir is the transport coming from Southeast Asia. So yeah, some people are wanting to move away from coir or choosing to move away from coir if that's what their end consumer are looking for. It needs washing, so it needs to be washed with fresh, clean water. If you don't do that, it's pretty unusable. It can have a really, really high pH and really high potassium levels. And just a note at the bottom, could this be another palm oil situation? We're not seeing this at the moment, but as these raw materials become less available and more people go towards peat-free growing, is there going to be situations where native land is cleared in these areas to produce coir? We're not saying that that's happening now, but it's just something we want to be aware of moving forward, and hence why we've looked at some of the mixes behind you in the trials to see if we remove the coir, can we still grow? So we'll just compare the two lab results. So we've got coir on the left and pine bark 0 to 8 on the right. And like I said, the chloride, the potassium and the sodium on the left are much higher than what they are in the pine bark here, which gives you an overall higher conductivity than what the bark is showing. Obviously we're only using these raw materials in kind of 20, 30, 40%, but it's just to be aware that we need to make sure that the nutrition in the growing media that we're trialling and with the new Fibagro raw materials, it's all good and safe for crops. At the moment, container ships are going around the Cape of Good Hope at the bottom and they're not going through the Suez Canal. So at the moment that's adding roughly $1,500 container surcharge, which if you look at it just as a coir, around a £4 per cubic metre increase in that cost of coir this year. And over the past few years, we've seen a 40% increase in coir. So that's what's happening this year. But what happens if there's an issue and boats can't go around the bottom of the Cape of Good Hope and they're not going through the Suez Canal? What does that mean for the cost of coir? What does it mean for the availability? We just don't know. So it's that fluctuation that we're trying to avoid with going down this Fibagro route. So the future, what are we looking to do? So here at ICL, we're a big global company, but this in the UK is the only part of ICL that has a growing media division. So it's really good that ICL have decided that they want to invest in UK horticulture and provide a UK sustainable growing media. So the raw materials come from Scotland straight into our factory, and like it says there, to produce a UK sustainable growing media. So that's 100% made, manufactured in the UK for UK horticulture, and I think that's a really good message that we're trying to achieve. Just want to give ourselves a little pat on the back. So these are the ICL figures that it's 2018 on the left through to current day. The red bar in the middle is our peat usage. And as you can see, we're coming down nicely, mainly by increasing the Fibagro percentage in Woodfibre. And actually, kind of round of applause to you guys for kind of embracing peat reduction and also transitioning into peat free. Obviously there's a lot of work to do, but I just thought it was a really good slide to say actually we are going in the right direction, and what we're showing here today will hopefully be able to drive that peat usage down to a point where if a ban doesn't come into place, we're still doing all we can to go peat free and provide you with good quality growing media. So what we're showing you today is at the back, we've got all the raw materials and the mixes that are in the trials. So we've got now 4 grades of Fibagro Advance wood fibre. So it goes super fine, fine. The current fine that you've probably all been using will be named standard, and the current standard will become coarse. Our Fibagro wood fibre is different from other wood fibres, and we're able to blend these back together to create 100% wood fibre mixes that we'll be able to show you shortly, and what Steve will touch on in the trial. So I'll hand back to Steve and we'll talk about the trial setup and then turn around and have a look at the plants.
The trials that we've done this season, we wanted to obviously look at our standard peat-free that we're currently using. So that's still a blend of our Fibagro coarse with pine, bark and coir. And then as Stephen was explaining, about the future potentials for difficulties, we've now got mix 2, that is a bark free, and mix 3, that is a coir free. So worth pointing out still that these are actually still 70% Fibagro, and then the other 30% is made up with either coir or pine bark. And then the 2 completely new ones on the end, mix 4 and 5, these are 100% of our Fibagro. And a little bit like Stephen was just saying, that not all Fibagros are created equal, or wood fibres should I say. Fibagro is different. We're actually, like we used to with peat, we used to harvest it off the peat bogs and then grade it all into different sizes, and then we would be putting that back together in different percentages to create the mix that we need. This isn't just about creating one grade of wood fibre and putting your plants in it. This is about looking at the properties of the finer ones and then mixing them together to create what we need to grow a plant in. There's a little snapshot of the mixes when those produced, and the additives that we was adding, we wanted to keep as much of it the same as possible. It's very easy to kind of go, well, we're thinking the one we're barking is going to use more nitrogen, so we'll change that as well, but we needed to keep some things the same. So they've all had PG mix at the same rate, the same amount of Osmocote N, so that's a 5 to 6 month controlled release nitrogen. H2 Grow, Lime and Micromax was the same. And then the variations in it, treatment 1 had 5 kilograms of Osmocote 5, and treatment 2 had 4 kilograms of Osmocote 5, both 8 to 9 month products. So that would be for the shrubs. And then for the perennials, we've got a high K 8 to 9 at 4 kilograms, and then an Osmocote 5 8 to 9 at 4 kilograms. So this is how those are arranged. You'll see on the right we've also got Gristolinia listed. So a little snapshot of the Gristolinia is down there at the front. There wasn't enough differences in them yet because they're much longer term crops, so we haven't bought them here today. So we'll be looking at the hydrangea in a minute. And so these are mix 1, mix 2, all the way down to 5, and then the variations will be in the odd and even numbers. And then similarly for the perennials, the variation being the high K and the Osmocote 5. Shortly after potting, back in April, the mix is down there. You can clearly see the wood fibre ones on the on the right hand side, they initially look quite bright, but you'll see that actually they take on a much darker appearance soon afterwards. So this was 6 weeks after potting. They've now been moved outside, and so that was 8 weeks. And then similarly for the geums. We're just going to have a quick walk round and have a look at these bars now, because it's kind of looking at them is the best thing. So we've got the Woodfibre ones at the end, those last 4, with the standard peat-free at this end. And this is the bark-free and the coir-free. Some obvious standouts. Probably the Woodfibre ones are smallest, even with the different rates. And the higher 5 kilogram ones are clearly bigger and probably darker green than the 4 kilograms. So some obvious standouts. But some of this comes back to, we're probably expecting the Woodfibre ones to be smaller, and because they had less nitrogen. We know with the wood fibres that are in there, they're going to absorb more wood fibre. And similarly with like this one here, that's actually got bark in there, but this one hasn't. So actually it didn't use as much nitrogen, even though they've all got the same amounts in. These bedding plants were also given similar treatments. We haven't sort of gone over these too much just because of time today, but we have got our 2 sort of standard-ish peat-frees here with a bark-free, coir-free, and then the Woodfibre. And even with them, you can kind of begin to see that, you know, the one at the end is probably lighter green and probably needed that little bit more nitrogen at source. But to be fair, we was expecting that. We know that. Next step is to actually then start to compensate for the correct amount of nitrogen in all of these. Same with these geums. When you look at these, you can kind of, so we've moved away from being 2 different rates of fertiliser. We're now looking at the high K. So we wanted to really look at whether or not we're still wanting to use high K in perennials. We know from what we was discussing earlier that coir comes with potassium. If we're going to add coir into mixes and then we're going to use a high K, we know that we're putting more potassium in. So actually, do we need it? So with these, we've got the high K on the end and then it's Osmocote 5. But you can probably see the high K ones are shorter. Stands to reason, that's what we'd expect. And when you get to the ones with the coir, you can probably see that they're actually smaller still, and it's just, we're tipping that balance towards the high K even more. But again, when you're comparing alongside each other, there's differences. But if they all look like that one, you wouldn't be necessarily saying they're not saleable. And it's the same with the 100% Woodfibre ones. If your criteria is to be coir-free, we can do it. If it's to be 100% UK sustainable source material, you know, we can achieve that now. So if we move on to the salvias. So there's probably less differences with these, certainly in height. I think the biggest difference is probably just in leaf colour, and it's possibly not even easy to see between them all. So I suppose in some ways it goes to show that actually some plants, it will make less difference anyway, which one you're going for. And I suppose as well it makes it easier to kind of have a mix that you might be growing some shrubs, and equally if you put your salvia into it, you probably won't see a lot of difference, whereas clearly with the geums there's a bigger difference. So there's less difference with these salvias. So we haven't brought all of the trials on today with this growing media. We're also conducting them in liners, so we are looking at the liner stages as well, just to fill in that gap.
As much as it's really great to have a visual look at the trials, we have to actually have some scientific data to back up what you're seeing there. So during the trial, we've used these WET 150 data loggers, which you can see in the gristolineas down here. They connect up to the computer and the screen, and that's actually giving you a live feed of what those loggers are looking at right now. So here they are on the bed, set up nicely in the gristolineas, and they measure 3 things. So first of all, we'll look at the temperature, and it just proves to us that, yes, we all know it's been cold and wet, but actually this is end of May and early June, and you can just see that fluctuation in temperature there. But kind of what we're looking at here is that everything is grouped together nicely, and that's just proving that what we've achieved with these growing medias is actually the temperature and the way they react is pretty similar in the pot. And then moving into conductivity, so that's the way that the Osmocote releases. The top red line is the standard peat-free with 5 kilos of Osmocote 5 in. But more interestingly, the orange line in the middle with all the other ones is the standard peat-free with 4 kilos of Osmocote. And actually, then we look at how nicely grouped together they are at the end of May and kind of 3 or 4 weeks later. That level of consistency is really nice, and that's what we want to see. And it just proves that the Osmocote N and the Osmocote 5 is really consistent and safe for plants, and it's just getting the balance right of what rate you want to go for moving forward. So obviously we've only got one logger in one pot, so we can't draw huge conclusions from this, but it's a starting point where we can start to look at this data, analyse it, and start to go, that mix is providing more or less of whatever we're looking at that particular point. So just to keep you all awake, little quiz. This one's moisture. So there's a top line up here. Which one do you think, considering what we've spoken about today and what you know about raw materials, which one do you think held the most moisture? Mixes with coir in. Which number? 1 to 6. So it's 1 and 2 are our standard peat free. You just said mix 1, yeah. Bark free, so it's got coir in. That's the other one. So actually it's the standard peat free. So what we've got there is we've got 3 raw materials acting with each other, and probably that's the one we've got the most technology on. That's why it's our standard peat free. So that's what we were hoping for. And ideally, mix 1 with the other rate of Osmocote is our second one. So that proves that nicely. Third is actually 100% wood fibre, but the coarse one. Is anyone surprised at that? So yeah, I think that goes to show that what we can do here at ICL with the Fibagro Advance range, that thermomechanical process that we've got at the factory, really produces those split end fibres, and actually there's lots of small air pockets within each raw material, which you can see at the back there. And that holds quite a lot of moisture. So when you blend that back together with the 3 grades that we've got now, that we've done in this trial, it just proves that actually everyone's scared of growing in 100% wood-based products, but actually it can provide quite a lot of moisture. So then next is the bark free, so the mix with coir, so it's 70% wood fibre and 30% coir. Again, probably not to what we were, that's kind of what we were looking for there. We all know that coir is probably the one that is most like peat in its water holding capacity. And then unsurprisingly, the coir free, so the one with the bark, like we said at the start, is holding the least moisture. But like I've said, it's only really a snapshot, as we've only got one logger. Hopefully, as we expand these trials and look forward, we'll get more loggers and we can get more consistency with the data. What we've also done is we haven't just looked at live data within the trial. We've also, when the mixes were made, we kept a retained sample, and 6 weeks later we tested that. I won't bore you with any of the data, but it's just proving that we can show what happens to these raw materials in the new mixes and how that relates to Osmocote release over a 6-week period when it's not being used. And then we did a 12-week after potting, so that's from a crop from each of the treatments, and that just shows how that raw material mix is working with the Osmocote and how it's releasing. So I'll hand back over to Steve, who's going to have some practical tips to end.
Yeah, so I just wanted to finish on this, because obviously it's our product that's being sort of taken away as a peat base, and we're having to find that next replacement. But actually, there's only so much we can do, and there's clearly things out there that we're all going to need to do to help. So one of the real easy ones to do is with H2 Grow. It lasts 12 months if you use the higher application rates from just one application. It's such a low volume of use, with 5 meals in 1,000 litres of water, meaning a 5-litre bottle does 1,000,000 litres of water. So these are not high volume products that you're going to use lots of, but they do go a very long way. We can then start to see that we're going to get improved water management, more effective re-wetting, and maximise the water hum capacity. But it's also worth just noting that I get asked several times, but I've got H2 Grow in my growing media, why would I need it in the water? And it's as simple as you've got a growing media that might want to attract water, but you've still got water with a high surface tension. So actually what we really want to create is water that wants to go into a growing media, and a growing media that wants to absorb water. Other things to consider, touching on H2 Grow again here, but just because we've got H2 Grow in our growing media, our new growing media we've put alongside our plug, doesn't mean that our plugs have actually got any H2 Grow in them either. So we could end up with a little hydrophobic plug going into some growing media. You're wetting up the growing media around it. There's no reason why that water will transfer into a really dry plug. So just think about applying some H2 Grow liquid to all of your young plants, just so you can give them the best chance to really get rooted out and not sit there and go dry. And also, when was they last fed? Young plant producers are typically using water-soluble fertilisers. Probably by the time they reach your nursery, they're already 3 days without a proper feed. And if they sit around for another week, that water-soluble feed would have run out. So actually what we want to do is give them some feed to help bridge the gap, because they're not going to get any of our nice osmocote that we put around them in that grow media until they start to get their roots out. So the quicker we can get their roots out, the better it can be. We suggest using something like Peter's plant starter. It's quite unique with its 10-52-10. It's kind of the only time that you really are looking to have a really high phosphorus feed, but it's super safe with a really low conductivity. But what we're trying to do is bridge that gap between its water-soluble feed that it had from the young plant producer and when it gets into your final container and it's getting its roots out. And so we can help to speed up some of that establishment. Other things to think about, I see these sort of things quite often. Pin jet nozzles, been around for a long time, probably not the most efficient anymore or effective, but this nursery probably had a repair at some point on this irrigation line and it's been probably glued back wrongly. You know, just think about making sure that we're putting on water effectively and evenly, and then where it goes up and down, clearly the second nozzle along is going to be much lower, it's not going to flow to the same area. So simple things can actually make big differences. Just performing something as simple as a uniformity test. You know, you might all think that you've got very even irrigation, it's all working well, but have you actually tested it? Have you actually tested what happens at the end where you haven't got extra nozzles creating the overlaps? Might be why the plants at the end are always drying out. Can really show you that maybe you need to look at improving irrigation. Also, we now know that there's some advantages with peat free, that it dries out on top. We see less liverwort, we see less moss, and a lot less weeds at times. But that also lends us to think that actually when we use a peat-based growing media, it looks dry on the top, and we knew it needed a water underneath. It's not the same anymore. If we're going to go along to that crop that's on the left and actually give that extra water, what we're going to do is leach the very nutrients that we try to put in there to have extra. Nitrogen will be the first thing out the bottom, and we're also trying to get more of that in there. So getting the pots out, actually having a proper check and making sure that you're watering plants when you need to. Add H2 Grow liquid. Use shorter, more frequent irrigation cycles. We know that these peat-free materials hold less water, so if you was putting on 3 minutes each time when you use a peat base, clearly shouldn't be 3 minutes on every cycle when we're peat-free, because we know the pot can't hold as much. Lower cation exchange values, straight out the bottom goes our nutrition. Check those pot moisture levels to make sure we're managing that irrigation effectively and making sure we're watering in those plugs sooner after potting, because we know they're not going to be getting as much water from the growing media around them when they're potted. Check to make sure that the surface is not just dry and we're going to water them. And then just the first couple of waterings, just make sure they're thoroughly wetted up. And I just wanted to finish on this. This was a scenario that I was at with a grower just a few weeks ago. So looking at both of those, they're a peat-free grower. What pot would you imagine would be better for growing in a peat-free growing media? Left. The one on the right has got more holes. Actually, probably what we need from pot manufacturers is actually to have pots that have got probably less holes. The hole in the middle of that pot, I could fit my finger in. And these are all kind of little things that if you was growing peat reduced and peat free, well, that might be fine for you peat reduced on the right. You wanted a bit more drainage, but actually we know with the peat free we're getting probably more draining through, and actually we need to retain a little bit more water. So simple things, and this is where I say that we can only do so much to actually get to, you know, a good peat free growing media. But you know, possibly in the future, these holes might need to be blocked up, so we've actually got, might only be a little reservoir at the bottom, but just to create a little bit more water holding in our pots, just to help us out. So yeah, any questions?